Hello and welcome. You're watching The Mint. I'm Abhishek Singh. As we record this, President of the country is addressing a joint session for the members of the lower and the upper house. Shortly after, the economic survey will be put out. And with that, the countdown to the budget has come into the last stage. Now, to discuss what the budget is going to be like, some key expectations, and of course, about the state of economy, I'm joined by one of the finest economists, Dr. Sajjid Chinoy, Chief Economist India, JP Morgan Chase, Managing Director. And of course, Dr. Chinoy has also been a member of PM's Economic Advisory Council. Thanks for talking to us, Dr. Chinoy. Thank you so much. Welcome.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Do you think government is likely to put more money in hands of people by changing the tax slabs?
So one can't rule out some modifications on the tax side. But given the fiscal math that we discussed, I'm not sure there is room for any large, dramatic changes on the tax front. In fact, if anything, we should be slightly conservative in budgeting taxes for next year, because if growth were to slow, that will have an impact on tax buoyancy. And the government, to its credit, has been extremely conservative in how it budgets taxes. Now, there is a larger issue of over the next 3 years, do we want reform on personal income taxes? Personally, I would like to see that, where we reduce tax rates, take away many of these exemptions, and thereby broaden the tax base on the personal side.
I mean, that's another way of putting more money in hands of people. And if you're talking about spurring the economic growth, one way to do that is to encourage spending and perhaps direct cash benefits, etc. We spoke about it earlier as well. If you could focus on that now.
So, as I mentioned, the government did, the food program is very important and a crucial safety net through the years of the pandemic. But now the economy has emerged from the pandemic. We're fully open again. The services sector is open. So it's perfectly understandable why the government would want to taper the food program like it did in December. So subsidies played an important role last year in buffering the shock, both from the pandemic and from the war. So fertilizer subsidies went up, food subsidies went up. But now, as things normalize, my sense is those subsidies, that subsidy bill will be tapered this year. And in a way that gives the government more space to do capital and other expenditure. 3 years after the pandemic, and this is true of all emerging markets, not just India, I'm not so sure if it's going to be, any direct income support for a few months that's going to change consumption patterns or savings behavior or livelihoods. I think 3 years after the pandemic, it's all about job creation. That the best way to alleviate any residual scarring from the pandemic is job creation. So personally, I'm in the camp that 3 years out, the focus has to be on, I know I've gone on like a broken record, on physical infrastructure, because that creates blue collar construction jobs. And in addition to that, I think, we need to also focus on health and education. But if we do that right, the health, the education, the physical infrastructure that creates the jobs, I think that's the best way of helping growth and job creation going forward.
All right. Now, let me offer you the quote-unquote poison chalice and ask you about your prediction for what the economic growth for the year is likely to be.
It's very hard to put a number on economic growth, just given how many moving parts there are. Remember, we're coming into unprecedented global uncertainty, and so very hard to predict the extent of the global slowdown.
Sorry, I'm asking you to stick your neck out and give me a number.
Yeah,
but then, any kind of...
I think kind of a number or range at this point is not very meaningful. I think it's less about targeting a certain number and instead focusing on where growth should come from. And so in my mind, from my mind, what's important in the next year is that monetary conditions stay at a point where inflation comes off and that creates purchasing power, that the current account deficit comes down and any external instability goes away and we build reserves, and the center keep pushing on public investment. I think if those things happen, that macro stability ceases to be an issue or a constraint, halfway through the year, and we're hitting our public investment targets, and the global cycle begins to turn, we'll be well positioned for growth to accelerate in the following year. So I think that's more important than whether the economy grows at 6 or 5.5% next year.